In video 6, we left off talking about the birth of the instructor. It says in the last paragraph of that section, under the creation of humankind, now the birth of the instructor occurred in this way. When Sophia let a drop of light fall, it floated on the water. Now light is masculine, it's of the father, and water is feminine, it's of the mother. So the monad is made up of the mother, father, remember that. And it's essentially the essential ingredients, the male and the female spiritual attributes that are necessary for all creation or emanation to take shape. Sophia Zoe used this drop of light in her and mixed it with water, and immediately a human being appeared, being androgynous. So this creature or being is both male and female, not physically, but rather spiritually. When we see the word androgynous, we're not referring to flesh, we're referring to an attribute of both male and female. She molded that drop first as a female body. So the very first being that was brought about was a soul body, not a flesh body. And that soul body was after the likeness of Sophia Zoe, who is the soul-oriented part of Sophia, wisdom. This body was known as female. It was created to be the vessel by which the truth would be retained and held, and that truth would then be shared with humanity. This is why that truth is known as the instructor. Now, when you talk about the first soul being, in other parts of Gnostic texts, and even the first chapter in Genesis, we often refer to that first being as being male. Now that's the first emanation that we refer to when God created He, both male and female. That being is the spiritual being. Now the soul being is the feminine. Now the feminine also has its spiritual aspect, which is the Pistis Sophia, which is the daughter of Barbella, which is the feminine part of the monad, the receiver or the former or shaper of the will, which is the father, the founder of the monad's original thought. Barbello being foreknowledge, Sophia being forethought. So she considered what was happening with Yaldabaoth and its rulers and knew that mankind would need an instructor to carry this truth forth. And so this being that was created essentially was Eve of life, also sometimes called Achamoth, much in the same way as we call Jesus the deliverer of the message of Christ, or the Christ aeon aspect of God, the salvation. This was the counterpart to that, sometimes also known as Mary, essentially any being or entity that is carrying the message so that it might be shared in whatever way, whether it be through Mary conceiving of the Christ, or it be through the serpent in the garden with Eve at the knowledge of tree of good and evil. This is the instructor. It was female again because that was its essence, to be a vessel for that knowledge, a repository, if you will. Now, after she molded it with the body and the likeness of the mother who appeared, the likeness of the mother that appeared was Pistis Sophia, and she finished it in 12 months. Now, I didn't mention this in the previous video, but understand the 12 months refers to this being taking on the entire truths that are held within all of the constellations. This is the significance of the 12 months. The 12 constellations of the 12 months. But within that truth was the serpent, which would be the 13th constellation, an androgynous human being conceived, whom the Greeks call hermaphrodite, while the Jews call her Mother Eve of life, that is, the instructor of life. So the first Eve was Eve of life, Zoe Sophia, and she came about as a daughter of Zoe Sophia, which really was the likeness of Zoe Sophia. So she really is the soul aspect of Sophia, showing up in a soul body and sharing and instructing mankind with gnosis and truth. If you want to consider this as an actual physical being that was intersex, you can certainly do that. Whether you believe that or you believe that referring to the qualities of someone that takes on the male and female attributes, that's perfectly fine. It doesn't really matter ultimately. The main point here, this being has harmony with the male and female nature, whether it be in a physical form or it be in a spiritual way or soul-oriented way. While the Jews call her Mother of Eve, that is the instructor of life, her child is the creature who is the Lord. Now, her child ultimately is the Christ that comes about, because it's through this instructor that truth is carried through and delivered, or it's this truth that is carried forth that brings all things into being and all truth into its embodiment. And so it shows up in different ways. It showed up in the form of this first being known as Eve of life, and later the body of Jesus. So you see these two complement each other. Afterward, the authorities called it the beast in order to lead their fashioned bodies astray. It was later renamed Akamoth, or the beast, so that it would be defiled, and also that it would be crucified and destroyed. In this case, the feminine would be defiled, and the masculine would be destroyed. The masculine would be emasculated, and the feminine would be desecrated. This is essentially the way in which the authorities, or the rulers, or ultimately the demiurge, go about to bind humanity and prevent them from this knowledge by essentially desecrating their symbols of knowledge and instruction, the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which are the two trees, the male and the female. Then the meaning of the beast is the instructor. Life itself is the instructor. Now remember, I had said before, when we're looking at Revelation chapter 11 and we have the two beasts, they are the political system or government of this world and the religious systems of this world. And they work together, and the religious being the second beast that gives power to the first beast. That's how they do it. They use the religious system to get people to line up with quote-unquote spiritual laws, to use what's called morality, which we also get the word mortal being, and immorality we get immortal. Now keep that in mind, because laws are the beginning of death. What you have here is religion, essentially, convinces people to find an enemy on the outside, someone else that is sinning or that's considered wretched, but they believe they're helping them, trying to save them from sin. And their understanding of what salvation means and their understanding of what sin means is misguided. Thus, they use them in a destructive way, unknowingly, sometimes knowingly, but doing it nonetheless for gain of power or reputation or money or fame. They use that mechanism of divide and conquer, essentially, so they can get people to vote for them. And then they get people, the pastors and preachers, essentially they are lobbyists for these politicians that want to be fascistic rulers, dogmatists. They go about and say, this is the way you do it, and there's no other way to do it. And I will set all these laws preventing you from learning for yourself and having the experience for yourself. Freedom, essentially, to take part in everything in life so that you may learn and understand the difference between what is good for you and what is not good for you. I keep you in ignorance so that I may have control over you. So this is what has happened. Essentially, the mother of life has been desecrated, corrupted, or twisted, so that you might not know this truth. And the one that empowers you with gnosis, which is the Christ, has been crucified, so it's been emasculated, so you have no true will. The meaning of the beast is instructor, for it was found to be wiser than all beings. Now keep that in mind, because later we come to understand that the serpent is cunning or wise than all the other beasts. So this instructor is also called a beast by the Yaldabaoth, or Jehovah, or the Lord God, because that's the way the instructor looks at it, or the Yaldabaoth wants to look at it. They want to look at it as though it's merely something to be desecrated and hated and reviled. Moreover, Eve is the first virgin who gave birth without a man. Remember earlier I had said to you that our original state is that we are able to birth other entities, in this case other humans, without intercourse. Now intercourse is taking part in the eating of or consuming of this flesh world. You ever heard that term, full course meal? And course is an actual track that you take, right? Running a course, or intercourse, meaning that we are in the midst of that feast of the flesh realm. And I think of the song Hotel California, where they stab it with their steely knife, but they could not kill the beast. And they're having a feast. This is what it's like. She is one who functioned as her own midwife. So this is our true nature, that we are able to create from both our male and female, because we are created in the image of God, known as a he or she, depending on what is our intention. If it's to be a vessel of truth, as an instructor, then that would be a feminine attribute, or in this case, female attribute, I should say. If it is to project and to dominate our will into chaos, to bring about light or truth and goodness, then that is male. And this is how God creates us as soul beings, both male and female. With these two attributes, being androgynous, our true nature was that we were able to bring forth, both male and female were able to give birth in due time and due season through will and formation of other human beings. And this was no longer necessary through intercourse and the pains of pregnancy and giving birth. And for the male, in this world realm, the nature is to be free rather than to be subjugated. But yet, it's a necessary cleaving to the woman in order for them to find a sense of completion through this thing called merging or marriage, which really is a false merging because it's not a true spiritual merging. This is what Philip calls a defiled marriage. But the true marriage to the Christ, which we are the body of Sophia in this realm, that's ultimately going to bring your ability to be truly androgynous or have true power to emanate all things, or within your power to emanate. Next section, Song of Eve. On account of this, it is said concerning her that she said, I am part of my mother, which is Barbelo, Sophia, Pistis, and I am the mother. This is hard for humans to understand because we think of ourselves, particularly in the Western culture, as individualistic. And we are, in fact, separated off, in a sense. But in the spiritual realm, it is what we do that unites us. Now, we have our own soul body or spiritual body, but we are all in unison in terms of what our ultimate motivation and where we find rest resides. This is different in this realm. Everybody has different motivations, and they are at different places on the continuum, whether it be toward the true father, toward the false father. And everybody has an amalgamation of this and varies even through time where they are on that continuum. I am the wife, I am the virgin. I am pregnant, I am the midwife. I am the one who comforts during labor pains. My husband produced me, and I am his mother. So here it refers to my husband is the Christ. Remember that Christ was, in the beginning, the first human, the first perfect human that was emanated from the mother-father. And then, following that, in the sequence was Sophia. But yet Sophia, being one of the aeons that stood before the autogens, the Christ, was also part of the Barbelo. So she was both the mother of the Christ, but at the same time, she was the consort to the Christ. And he is my Father and my Lord. Christ is also part of the Father. He is, in fact, is Word made flesh, which is our providence or evidence of the Father, Mother, or the Father, the founder of the will, which is the first thought. He is my potency. What he desires, he speaks with reason. Remember I had said that earlier, that as Gnostics, we gain truth or gnosis through empirical approach as well as the rational approach. And we gain rationale as a way to substantiate or sustain the reasons why we do things. But reason comes from within, and empiricism or rationale comes from within, and empiricism comes from without, which is through the sense-oriented world. I am becoming, but I have born a lordly man. So this becoming is within everyone, the Christ within, the hope of glory that ultimately becomes the Christ. That's within everyone, that we are becoming that, and we are giving birth to the Christ that's within all. Now these things were revealed by the will of Sabaoth and his Christ. So the Christ within the Jesus man is known as Sabaoth. So that Christ within him, the Jesus man that was able to go into the seventh heaven, the first man, the first begotten of God, first begotten Son of God, the first to get the understanding of Gnosis and the true nature of the Mother Father, the monad, God, not what was taught in the Old Testament and all these other religions that talk about laws and evil and death and destruction and judgment and harshness, but rather revealed by the will of Sabaoth and the Christ within him, his Christ, to the souls. This is the beginning of the soul-oriented being, who will come to the fashioned bodies of the authorities. So this understanding of God the monad will come through the souls of man and will be presented to the authorities, meaning the demiurge and his minions. Concerning these, the holy voice said, multiply and flourish to rule over all the creatures. And here we're referring to having authority over everyone, everything in this realm, including the authorities. You see? And we are to multiply and flourish that understanding as soul-oriented beings, not flesh-oriented beings. That was the original intention, which was in the nature of a balanced male and female aspect. When we reach that state, the necessity for sex will no longer be there. And also, we will no longer experience an unnatural birthing of the continual reincarnation wheel of what's called Genesis, or through the genes of Isis, which is the mother of this earth called Achamoth. And these are the ones who are taken captive by the chief creator according to their destinies, and that's us. Even though we are so oriented, brought about through Zoe Sophia and Pistis Sophia, nonetheless, we come here ultimately to enlighten the demiurge. And these are the ones who are taken captive by the chief creator, that's the demiurge, according to their destinies, and thus they were locked in the prisons of the fashioned bodies until the consummation of the age. In other words, the consuming of this thing called the zodiac or the constellation, this thing called fate, this ram, known as the Kanoma. And the consuming of that is the body of Christ and the blood of Christ. That's the beginning of Gnosis. And once we consume that, then we will be set free. We are literally eating ourselves away out of this realm. The cosmos rulers mowed Adam. At that time, the chief creator then expressed his opinion about humankind to those who were with him. Now the Yaldabaoth is concerned. Then each of them cast his seed into the midst of the navel of the earth. Now remember, there's 7. And how many continents are there on earth? There's 7. How many oceans are there? How many colors of the rainbow? How many notes in music? How many planets in the old archetypes? How many gods in the old archetypes? Well, 7. Since that day, the 7 rulers have formed humankind with his body like their body. So this is where we get the 7 continents and the 7 races. We're all formed after different archons, different rulers. The bodies, at least, are fashioned after these different rulers. And yet, this is done through time, in location, geography, and evolution. That's what you must understand. Knowledge is what forms all things, shapes all things. But his likeness is like the human who appeared to them. So, in other words, the true likeness of us humans is not the physical body, but rather soul-oriented and spiritual-oriented being. It's after that likeness. His fashioned body came into being one part at a time. So we began to transmute little at a time. And the chief created the brain and nervous system. So the one who fashioned the brain and nervous system was the chief creator, which is Yaldabaoth. Afterward, the person appeared like the one before him. Eventually, we will appear not as how Yaldabaoth fashioned us, but rather in the image of the first perfect human that came to this realm. He became a person with soul, and he was called Adam, that is, Father, after the name of the one who was before him. So the first true human, remember, was called Adam, the perfect human. Now, after Adam was made, he left him as a lifeless vessel, meaning Yaldabaoth and his minions, since he had taken form like an aborted fetus, with no spirit in him. Now, he didn't understand that this being having a flesh body, and even a soul body, was not enough. The soul is what gives us a clarity on what the spirit truly wants or needs. It's like the radar system. But the messages being sent are the spiritual messages. That's the spirit part. The spirit is what animates all things and brings all things to rest. The soul-oriented aspect of the human being is the life aspect. It's the bridgeway between the spirit and the physical body. What the soul does, it endows the human being with emotions and as well as instinct, a sense orientation about the world. So it gives one an inward type of knowledge or inward type of awareness. Regarding this, when the chief ruler remembered the word of Pistis, he was afraid that the true human might come into his fashioned body and rule over him. So this was why the Yaldabaoth went about to try to entrap mankind, because he saw that this Adam that was created had an understanding of who he is and his power. Because of this, he left his fashioned body 40 days without soul, and he withdrew and left him. Now, this physical body is different from the other Adam that we talked about earlier that Sophia brought about, which is the first man. Now, for 40 days and nights, now we know this number from Israel being in the desert 40 years. And then we also know this from Christ being in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights. But do we understand the significance of this number 40? In the moon cycles we have, which is roughly 28 days, 13 moon cycles, essentially in one full year, which comes out to 39 moon cycles in 3 years. But here we have 40 moon cycles. In other words, it's saying that 39, which is 3 full moon cycles, is three different revelations. So in other words, the first revelation would be the flesh-oriented, the second being the soul-oriented, and the third being the spiritual-oriented revelation. And on the 40th day is when one is finally freed from those three different experiences or obstacles, if you will. And so this is what we have. So at the very end of that, those cycles, those moon cycles, those 39 moon cycles, is the 40th day without soul. And remember, the moon is associated with the soul as well. Because of this, he left this fashioned body 40 days without soul, and he withdrew and left him. But on the 40th day, Sophia Zoe, now this is the life, which is the blood, which is the moon, which is the soul, sent her breath into Adam, who was without soul. He began to move upon the earth, but he could not stand up. And here, move, it means that was able to go and animate himself and do all things, eat and sleep and things like that. But he was not able to stand up face to face with his power, see his true nature. Now, when the seven rulers came and saw him, they were very much disturbed. They walked up to him and seized him. So they saw this new being, that he had a soul in him. So he was emanating the soul, and he had power. And they became concerned. And the chief ruler said to the breath within him, the breath is what they were concerned about. This is a new thing for them. Who are you? And from where have you come here? It answered and said, I came through the power of the human for the destruction of your work. Now, what they heard was human. So for them, it was like music to their ears, because they saw the human as weak and feeble. It was their creation, after all, the physical body. So they thought of the human being as being the physical body. And so that was a relief to them. When they heard, they glorified him because he had gave them rest from their fear and concern. They said, well, a human? So this human fashioned some kind of thing called breath, and it's like a toy that this being is made. So this shouldn't concern us. Insignificant. Then they called that day the day of rest, because they rested themselves from their troubles. And when they saw that Adam could not stand up, they rejoiced. They took him and left him in paradise and withdrew up to their heavens. Now, paradise is referring to the prison complex. So here, paradise, etymology, compound of pari, around, forward, hence in front of, near, against, around, to form a wall. The first element is cognate with Greek pari, around, about. The second is from pi root, dein, to form, build. The Greek word originally used for an orchard or hunting park, place like or compared to paradise, essentially a compound, a prison matrix that we're talking about here. If you understand the spherical earth, you understand that no matter where you go on this planet, you're not going to escape, because there's the ozone layer and we can't go beyond it. And beyond that in the heavens are the archons. And some have been cast down to this earth as well, as we'll learn later. So this paradise is not the same paradise that was called the luxuriant earth referred to earlier, where the first human resided, where we were intended to be from the beginning, the Genesis chapter 1. This is telling you the process from which we went from Genesis chapter 1 to Genesis chapter 2. Soul and spiritual-oriented human being to the flesh-oriented human being, trapped into our bodies until the consummation of the ages. They took him and left him in this compound and withdrew up to their heavens. In other words, we were trapped into this thing called earth. Eve gives Adam life. After the day of rest, that's the seventh day, Sophia sent Zoe, her daughter, who is called Eve, as an instructor to raise up Adam. So what we understand here is that prior to this, we had Zoe coming forth and helping out by introducing soul into this man, this flesh man. And so then Zoe was sent again back as an instructor to raise up Adam, in whom there was no soul, so that those whom he would produce might become vessels of light. This is ultimately what was intended from the beginning. We are all to become vessels of light, the physical body, so that we might instruct the chief ruler and all of its followers and minions, you see, so that those parts of Sophia would be redeemed and be brought back to the full. When Eve saw her male partner cast down, she pitied him, and she said, Adam, live, rise up on the earth. Remember earlier I had said that the paradise, the prison, is earth? And this is where the chief ruler and the archons had left this flesh Adam. Well, here it says it. Adam, live, rise up on the earth. Immediately her word became an accomplished deed. Remember I said accomplishments? All you need to do is use the word to manifest these accomplishments that already reside within you. You get to the point where you're a soul-oriented being, such as Zoe was, or is, then you're able to accomplish these deeds immediately through word. Immediately her word became an accomplishment deed. For when Adam rose up, immediately he opened his eyes. When he saw her, he said, "You will be called mother of the living, because you are the one who gave me life." Now, he's not referring to his flesh body being animated. What he's referring to is, for the first time, he had truth, which is called spirit or soul. So this was given to Adam for the first time. And that was when, finally, he was able to see and have gnosis and actually live. And this is when he had become a living soul. The cosmic rulers raped the earthly Eve. Then the authorities were informed that their fashioned body was alive and had risen, and they were very much disturbed. Now I want you to remember that in the secret book of John, we have a somewhat different account than what we have here. What we want to understand that each one of these writers are doing the best they can to write all these down based upon their visions or what they're being told. And so we must never look at these texts as infallible or absolutely correct word for word for word. What is more important are the allegories, the parables, the symbols, the correspondences, all of the things we talked about in previous couple of videos, and the truths that are held in those means of revealing our gnosis. And so this is what we must understand, the message. When we get trapped into how it happened exactly, that becomes the messenger. And then we start to miss the message because we start to argue over how did it happen exactly. What's more important is that it's happening, and there's a message in that it's happening. And the same can be said of the Bible, because if you look at the four Gospels, they're not 100% consistent either. Man is not yet perfect in the way he's able to project his perfection. They came to Adam, and when they saw Eve speaking with him, they said to one another, "What is this enlightened woman?" Something within them knows and is frightened by truth. And this is the way it always is, because people sense, even those that are flesh-oriented beings, the Hylics, they sense within someone who holds truth a potential threat. And so they see that as threatening, because people generally have difficulty with transformation and change because they get comfortable in what they want to believe is true and what they know to be reality or existence. What is in this enlightened woman? For truly she resembles the likeness that appeared to us in the light. Now come, let us seize her and cast our seed into her, so that when she is polluted, she will not be able to ascend to her light, but those whom she bears will serve us. And this is really what Yaldabaoth and the Demiurge want to do. They want to set down laws and authority over humanity, so they rule over them because they feed off of mankind's energy and blood. But let us not tell Adam, because he is not from us. Rather, let us bring a stupor upon him and suggest to him in his sleep that she came into being from his rib, so that the woman may serve and he may rule over her. Now this is very different from what we've gotten out of Genesis, right? Genesis tells us that the Lord God purposely put Adam to sleep so the woman could be brought forth. And this is a telling of what's supposed to be factual and true. Now, what's true is not always what is truth. These are two different things you must understand. Now, it may have happened that Yaldabaoth did go about and put man into a sleep. And in a sense, in a metaphorical sense, woman came from the rib of man, because what is in the rib of man? Well, man's heart. So the way in which Yaldabaoth was able to captivate the heart of man is to use that part of him that was essential, the feminine part of himself, against him. And so he longed for that part, and he then fell in love with the flesh-oriented woman. And so this is how it goes about. So you can really, in a sense, you could say that it's true to say that Yaldabaoth created woman from man's rib, from his heart, essentially. But is that the way it actually happened is not as important, as I said, again, as to what is the message being told to us here. And the message here is so that the woman may serve and he may rule over her, because it is in the woman, remember, that was the first human that carried truth, which was the instructor that's being talked about here, Sophia, Achamoth, that was to instruct man. And so how do you prevent woman from tapping into their gnosis and their truth that they were to carry via vessel of truth and share that with humanity? Well, you subjugate them. But how are you going to subjugate the woman? Well, you get the man to subjugate her. But how will you get the man to subjugate her? Well, you subjugate the man, and you convince him that the model of the universe is after physical marriage of the male and female. And then you take chapters out of Matthew and you misalliterate them, mistranslate them. And you say that Jesus, when he's talking about let no man put asunder what God has brought together, then you take that as meaning that you're not supposed to divorce, or that means that you're not supposed to get married. And so this is what you do. You go about and you deflect the truth, and you turn the truth and you twist it to your ends. When the truth of the matter is, Christ is referring to that it's our nature to be androgynous, that God created us, emanated us this way. That is what should not be torn asunder. The heart of who we are is truly not to marry unless it is out of love, and that when we tear out our counterpart from us on this realm, our soulmate, if you will, essentially what we are doing, we're ripping a part of ourselves from ourselves, you see. So when you want to find marriage, you should do it not because you're getting older, you're in your 30s or 40s, and you're worried about what everybody thinks about you, you're still single, you're in your 40s, 50s, or because you want to have children, or because you're a woman and you feel your time is ticking away on the biological clock to have children. These are not the reasons to get married, but the reason to get married is truly to find your soulmate. And if you see your worthiness to receive that, and you become the qualities that you seek from your partner, then your soulmate will arrive, you see. So this is how it's been set up. Laws were put into place, subjugate man, so the man would subjugate woman, because woman originally was the instructor of truth, and Christ, or the male, is the redeemer of that woman. You see, because Sophia originally, the wisdom, created an anomaly in thinking when she wanted to embrace the all who could not be embraced. That anomaly brought about everything else that followed. Then Eve, since she existed as a power, laughed at their false intention. She darkened their eyes and secretly left her likeness there with Adam. So how did she go about to do this? Well, she formed an actual flesh female. She entered the tree of knowledge and remained there. And the way she escapes is through the body of a serpent or seraphim, angel that comes down. They pursued her, and she revealed to them that she entered the tree and had become the tree. And the tree here is the tree of knowledge. And when the blind ones fell into a great fear, they ran away. Because the two things that they're most afraid of that exist are the tree of knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life. Those are the two trees they warned that Adam and Eve not eat from, because even they themselves were too afraid to eat from that. Afterward, when they sobered up from their stupor, they came to Adam, and when they saw the likeness of the woman with him, they were troubled, thinking that this was the true Eve, and they acted recklessly. So sometimes when people have fear, they will run away, but other times they will get into a stance of fear that puts them into a state of frenzy. And they start to lash out because they want to essentially destroy the thing that they fear. They think by destroying it, they'll be able to get rid of it and they will be relieved of their fear. But they don't realize the fear is coming from within. But nonetheless, and they acted recklessly and came to her and seized her and cast their seed upon her. Essentially, they raped her. They did it deceitfully, defiling her not only naturally but also abominably. Meaning, in other words, not only physically but also defiling her soul. First, defiling the seal of her voice. So the seal here is truth. This is secret knowledge. So they wanted to get her to speak. So they raped her and say, "Tell us who you are. Tell us what this is." Which had spoken with them, saying, "What is it that exists before you?" They want to know this thing called the soul, the spirit, or the light, or the breath. What is this? They meant to defile those who might say, at the consummation of the age, they had been born of a true human by means of the word. They didn't want her to actually admit that she was the mother of life, the true Eve. But yet, that's what they were actually afraid of. They were hoping that she'd say, "No, I'm not." They were hoping that they would be told what the flesh Adam had said earlier when he was endowed with the soul, "What is before you?" And he says, "Well, human. I'm a human." And they were hoping that she would say this as well. And instead, they just raped her. They meant to defile those who might say, at the consummation of the age, that they had been born of a true human by the means of the word. So in other words, they decided that rather than actually get her to tell them who she really is, they would rather not hear it at all. In other words, don't ask, don't tell. So they essentially mummed her. They didn't want to hear it, so they pushed her away. And they deceived, not knowing that they had defiled their own body. So they would never get to know this truth, this gnosis. And in fact, this body that they had formed would carry this truth within them, and thus that truth would realize that the body is corrupt. And the body ages and it dies, and it's useless without the spirit. It cannot be animated without the soul and the spirit. And it would begin to see this through time and its limitations. And it would begin to curse whoever brought this about. And eventually it would find out who brought this about. Well, it's the authorities, the archons, the demons and the angels to follow after the great archon, Yaldabaoth, the demiurge, which some call demons and angels, others call aliens from other planets. And that's fine. How you want to look at it, again, do not get stuck on the messenger. Don't get stuck on who's delivering that message, whether that message be good or evil. It was the likeness that the authorities and their angels defiled in every way. When you try to hook yourself into the messenger instead of the message, you either start to worship messenger and you then contort the message, or you want to find the messenger to be your enemy. And so you start to look for the enemy everywhere else. Unfortunately, there's a lot going on in the Gnostic movement that are misguiding new followers. They essentially equate Gnosticism to mean, or in other words, taking the red pill is realizing who are the enemies that are out there and how we need to be afraid of them, putting us into a state of panic and fear, and how great doom is coming. Another way of saying Armageddon, which essentially creates divide and conquer, they versus us. So because when we start to project that the red pill is all about the evil that's out there rather than the evil that's within us, then what happens is we want to pit ourselves on the right side or the good side and they on the bad side. And then we wait for the day of Armageddon because we want to be liberated from these evil ones. We're essentially doing the same thing that the demiurge and his minions do, which is we want to defile, destroy, get rid of the thing we're afraid of. But see, that is not what Gnosticism is about at all. That's not what the red pill is about at all either. The red pill in the Matrix is referring to Neo realizing that he is the one and the enemy was himself, and that he is Anderson, or son of an android. He is the progeny. His physical body is the progeny of the Andersons, which are the androids. And so he thus enters into these bodies of these androids, meaning he liberates them. And this is really what's happening here. So the Matrix really is a retelling of the Gnostic truth, but there are some flaws to that movie. I won't go into those now. When I talk about flaws, I don't mean the movie's good or bad, but rather it doesn't line up with Gnosticism completely, but it is certainly one of the better movies that is able to tell the story of the Gnostic truth. Most other stories fail. That's what you must understand. Taking of the red pill is not realizing that we're ruled by aliens or demons, or that China or Russia or some other entity out there, the white people, the transgendered, the 5G system. You see, when you're looking for the enemy outside of yourself, then your instinct is to want to defend yourself against them, and in some cases, take a preemptive stance to get rid of them. You see, that is not taking the red pill, because that creates division, and that's of the devil, from which we get the word devil, division. The red pill is about finding your power within, but the power lies in the knowledge of both good and evil, not the knowledge of good and evil that's outside you, but within you. Now, if everybody on the planet understood this truth and followed that truth, there would be no enemies. We would all respect that we each have our individual walks and blessings and struggles, and we're all walking that, and we'll all respect that in one another. And that's the red pill, is having that realization. The blue pill is essentially believing that you have to defend yourself from everything on the outside. You see, that's the blue pill. The enemy's out there, that I've already been absolved because I went to the cross and I said, forgive me of my sins. That's simple, you see. I have no work to do. Now, there are some within Orthodox Christianity that talk about needing to be perfect, but they fail as well because they want to cherry pick. Well, I can do this, but, I smoke and I eat this and I condemn other people and I judge them. The very thing Christ asks us not to do. You see, you can't be, quote-unquote, perfect according to these man-made laws, commandments that you see in the Old Testament and even in the New Testament that, unfortunately, Paul has some residual influence. That's the blue pill, to get stuck into that. That's the very thing that we're trying to get out of. That's been dominating for thousands of years. To create another enemy is the same song and dance that we've been doing from the very beginning of this flesh-oriented realm, trapped into this matrix, the prison planet. You see? It continues, Eve bears the children of the cosmic powers. Now, what happens after this, after she gets defiled? First, Eve conceived Abel from the first ruler. So, of the 7 rulers, the first ruler defiled her. And she bore the rest of the sons, meaning more than just 1, but actually 7. after the seven authorities. The first ruler would be the chief ruler, as I'm presuming here, Yottabel. And she bore the rest of the sons from the seven authorities and their angels. So it might even have been more than seven, because it was the seven authorities and their angels. Now, all of this came to pass according to the forethought of the chief creator. Now, the chief creator, again, is Yottabel, which is part of Sophia, but the part of Sophia known as Sophia Achamoth and Sophia Zoe, the flesh and soul-oriented human being. And remember earlier, forethought was enamored by the messenger, so that the first mother might bear within herself every seed mixed and joined together with the fate of the world and its configurations and justice. And configurations here are the configurations of the stars, right? The constellations and fate of the world, mixing of all these seeds together, of all ethnicities, of all shapes and sizes, would also be imprisoned into the flesh. And a plan came into being because of Eve, so that the fashioned bodies of the authorities might become fences for the light. This was all brought about with the wisdom from the beginning, foreknowledge. Then the light will condemn them through their fashioned bodies. As I said earlier, humankind will rise up in their gnosis through time and their wisdom to come to understand that this physical body is corrupt. It dies. It heals, but very slowly. It's really ignorant of where it comes from, who it is. It can't do much. It can't go beyond the ozone layer. It can't jump but maybe 2 or 3 feet into the air, unless you're Olympian, but even then maybe 5 or 6 feet, without breaking a bone. It has to kill other things in order to live. It has to eat 3 times a day. Woman has to give painful pregnancy. Man has within him, most men, a nearly unquenchable desire for intercourse and sex, as do some women, but yet that can never be quenched. But yet, at the same time, it has a need to cling to its wife, because it is in its wife that it finds the other part of itself. And so there's a contradiction in this realm, you see. No matter what you do, you can't truly be free, because when you get one side, you're longing for the other side, and you just have to make wise choices. Then the light will condemn them through their fashioned bodies, but we'll come to realize these truths through time, and then we will begin to ask, who made all this? What happened? It can't be that what's being told to us by Orthodox Christianity, Judaism, and Muslims, that it can't be true. That can't be all there is. There's something else going on here. The first atom of light is spiritual and appeared on the first day. This is the atoms created after light and darkness. Remember the first day in Genesis chapter 1? And God said, let there be light, and there was light, and God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and morning were the first day. So in other words, this is the beginning of understanding. Day, it does not refer to the cycling of the sun and the moon, but rather it refers to an emanation of the true Mother Father, Elohim, through the Christ and the Sophia and the Aeons. That's the Elohim being referred to here in chapter 1 of Genesis. That's the first day. We are made up of both light and darkness, meaning androgynous, meaning we have the power to emanate as well. We're sons and daughters of God. So that's the first day. The second Adam is a person with soul and appeared on the sixth day, called Aphrodite or Aphrodite. And remember that Aphrodite means from the foam, or from water, out of the water. Remember, she comes out of the water and with the seashell behind her. That's Aphrodite, coming out of the water. That's the soul-oriented. I always tell you that blood and water are of the soul, and the spirit is of the light, Aphros. And she is Venus, the god of love and beauty. The soul is enticed by things of beauty. It is within beauty and love that truth resides, because it is the soul that is carrying both the truth, which is the instructor within all of us, the form, but also it's the body that animates that or demonstrates that in this realm, whatever our will is and our passions are. And God saw everything he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and morning were the sixth day, or the sixth emanation. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. So the them is a he. It is both male and female. And God blessed them. And every tree you may eat from, every one of them, including the tree of knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life that are in the midst of, in this case, it was the luxuriant earth. But of course, they eventually were enticed into this prison planet, which called paradise, is also known as the wall or the matrix. The third Adam is earthly, that is, a man of law. See that? A man of law. This is the flesh-oriented man. He needs laws. in order to feel that he has any sense of authority. So he looks outside of himself towards someone to give him a message, to tell him what is right and wrong, to tell him what he's allowed to do and not allowed to do. He has no independence. He doesn't think for himself. This is, again, in the paradise that Yaldabaoth and his minions place us to, which is called earth, as it says again here. The third Adam is earthly, that is, a man of law, who appeared on the 8th day after the rest of poverty. And what is the rest of poverty? I always refer to poverty being your spirit. That's the rest of poverty. Now, appeared on the 8th day. What is this thing called the 8th day? Now, we know there's 7 days in the week, but we never really heard of 8 days of the week, have we? Well, we have. What happens on the 7th day? Do you remember what happens on the 7th day? This is a continuation of chapter 1, which really should end at chapter 2, verse 3, as written by Man-Made Bible. But here it says, "Thus the heavens and earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the 7th day God ended his work, or emanations, which he had made, and he rested on the 7th day from all his work which he had made." And again, that's the day of rest, right? That's being referred here, after the rest of poverty, the spirit. "And God blessed the 7th day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made." Now, verse 4, "These are the generations of the heavens and earth when they were created, in the day that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens." Well, that's the 8th day. That's the 8th day right there. Chapter 2, verse 4, that's the 8th day being referred to here in this section. So on the 8th day, the flesh-oriented Adam was created, the earthly Adam. Now the progeny of the earthly Adam multiplied and was completed and produced within itself all the technical skill of the Adam with soul, but all were in ignorance. What happens is, when man's soul body entered into the flesh body, it went into darkness and did not comprehend that it was in darkness or ignorance, and it began to ignore the truth. That's where the word ignorance comes from, ignore, ants. That's where we're going to stop for now, and we'll pick up in video number 8 under the section titled The Trees of Paradise and the Beast. Feel free to ask any questions if you need clarification about the video you just listened to. Again, thanks for listening. We'll talk again soon. Bye.